Many far-right influencers are turning to Twitch, a live streaming video site, to share falsehoods about the 2020 election and COVID-19. And they're not only spreading baseless theories, some of them are making money. According to an article in the New York Times, Twitch has allowed some influencers to rake in thousands of dollars. The Times reported one streamer made at least $26,000 in subscriptions alone since December. Kellen Browning covers tech and the video game industry for the New York Times. He wrote that article and joins me now for more. Kellen, thanks for being here. So Twitch is a platform that's typically used by video gamers. Why does it have some appeal to right-wing influencers? And how exactly are people making money off of those baseless conspiracy theories?
Sure. Well, I think, the main reason that it appeals is simply because some of those influencers, far-right influencers, have been kicked off of other platforms in recent months. So ahead of the 2020 election, they were kicked off of Facebook, YouTube, or Twitter when some of those sites clamped down on misinformation and conspiracy theories. So Twitch was a really appealing place to go, given that it's a big mainstream site, has about 30 million people visiting each day. And it was a place where they could make money broadcasting their views in real time, streaming about vaccines or conspiracy theories about the election. And so, it's been a place where they can make money. It's a place where it's become a bit of a safe haven for them. The way that they can make money essentially is the same way any other person on the site can, by streaming and having people subscribe to them. So they can pay $5, $10, or $20 to support the channel each month, or they can donate individually, or they also make money through advertisements on their streams. And Twitch does take a cut of these revenue sources, but the streamers can also link to outside sites, whether a PayPal or Cash App or a merchandise store, and make money that way as well.
You know, one of the interesting things that I thought when I read your article was you describe as almost as the rhetoric got more incendiary, that the money started rolling in more. And in your piece, one expert you spoke with said that Twitch monetizes the propaganda. And another said that the incentive, this is their quote, to lie, cheat, steal, hoax, and scam is very high when the cash is easy to acquire. Is there any correlation between the content that people create and how much money they make? And does that create disincentives towards truth-telling?
Yeah, absolutely. Certainly, that's what some of the misinformation experts I spoke with said, that essentially it's the cycle of, you're spreading wilder and wilder stories to get people to come back. And obviously, if you're making more money, then you're incentivized to continue doing that. And so yeah, it is true that in some cases these stories are getting more outlandish, and the money keeps flowing in, and it's continuing to do so.
And through your reporting, Kellen, you found at least 20 channels associated with far-right movements have begun streaming on Twitch since last fall. What more can you tell us about who some of these people are and how popular they are on the site?
Sure. So the person, maybe the most prominent channel of the people we looked at, her name is Tripsikor Maras Lindemann. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that correctly, but she goes by Tori. And she is a podcaster who has fought to overturn the results of the 2020 election. She's the person that you referenced has made at least $26,000 on the site so far, as well as over $80,000 through an outside GoFundMe. And she gets 3,000 to 4,000 views per broadcast generally. She's one of the 1,200 or so most popular channels on Twitch. There's also a man named Zach Payne. He also goes by Red Pill 78 in the QAnon community. He deals with some of the more bedrock conspiracy theories in the QAnon group. So things about pedophilia and the cabal, the deep state, things like that. He also sometimes has congressional candidates for office on his stream and encourages his viewers to donate to their campaigns. And then a third person that we looked at, her name was Millie Weaver. She's a former InfoWars correspondent. She also deals with vaccine conspiracy theories, talks about mask mandates and things like that.
So this continues to be a difficult conversation that we're having in this country, trying to balance what is a core principle of our democracy, which is freedom of speech and freedom of expression. What more can you tell us about Twitch's community guidelines and policies, though, when it comes to misinformation, when misinformation comes into conflict, really, with that right to free speech? How does Twitch moderate the content, and are they doing a sufficient job?
Sure. Well, what's interesting about Twitch is that in general, they have stricter standards for what's allowed on their site than some other social media sites. They actually were the first major platform to suspend former President Trump last summer. And so they've said very explicitly they're not a free speech site. But still have, in terms of content moderation, they're still reliant in some ways on users reporting misconduct or streamers reporting it themselves. They do have policies about hateful conduct and hate groups, but they've said QAnon is not a hate group. And in terms of misinformation, that's not a policy that they have yet. They have told me that they are developing a misinformation policy now, and so we will see what that says when it comes out. But too soon to say, I think, on the misinformation front.
All right. Kellen Browning, thank you.
Thanks very much.